Ladies and gentlemen, get on the edge of your seats because this is an Action Sports Jax special presentation. Storytellers of the 904.
He's known for his battles, maybe with you on Twitter, but back in the day with people like Tom Coughlin, one of the best beat reporters this area has ever seen, also turned talk show host. A little bit of Jacksonville stayed with him even when he made it to the big time with CBS Sports. It's another edition of Storytellers of the 904. Say hello to Pete Prisco. They couldn't have given you a better introduction when you played sports in high school.
Yeah, there's only one flaw in it, though. It's the best beat guy, not one of the best.
Hey, this is a little bit of part of this show. You've got to educate us on years and years ago, and we'll get to the beat time in Jacksonville. I've got this question for you. When you're a kid and you're obviously a sports fan, did you always want to do this? Like, when did you say, hey, I want to cover sports for a living?
Well, I started in high school. I mean, I worked on the student newspaper in high school. And it was funny you asked that because I'd play a football game and actually have to go interview my coach about the game. You know, it wasn't immediate. It was like a day or two later. And then we'd have to ask him who played well. And if he said me, I had to put my own name in my story.
That's awesome. That was awkward.
But I mean, I did it. And, it's back in those days, Brent, we'd play on Friday, and on Saturday, we'd have to go into the school to watch the film because it was on those reel-to-reel things, you know?
Oh, yeah,
and so we'd sit in there while they graded us. So if you missed the block, you got a minus. If you made a play, you got a plus. And so we're sitting there, and you're like arguing, I made a good play. And he's like, negative, you know? And then you come back, and then they finish it up and grade you for the whole thing. And we were the Colts, we were blue and green. And so if you were in the blue, you knew you had a great game. If you were in the green, you had a good game or whatever. And so you go see it on the wall. And so everybody always wanted to go in there and see that. And jokingly now, it's funny because I was a guard in high school on the football team and a guard on the basketball team. You can figure that one out. I was the point guard and guard. So, but I tell Steve Hutchinson, who also played at my high school, is in the Hall of Fame now, the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. I always tell him, I go, Steve, I feel bad for you because you're in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but you're the second best offensive lineman from our high school.
That's awesome. Hey, that level of accountability that you had back then, right, in front of everybody, which football offers that all the time, like in meeting rooms and watching film. But do you think where a little bit of this hard-nosed Pete Prisco was formed, and that accountability, did any of it come from that? It's like, hey, this is just what I grew up with, and now even in this profession, I'm going to hold people accountable.
Yeah, and I think, I grew up with all brothers, so we were always competitive in everything. I mean, we competed to change the channel. I mean, we didn't have, the remote controls back then. We had to do it with our hands or our feet. We used to drive my mother crazy because we'd lay on the floor watching games and flick from channel to channel with our feet. It used to drive her crazy. But, competitive, and I think we've lost a lot of that. And this is me preaching to the younger generation, but I think we've lost a lot of competitive drive and the want to be good. And it hardened you. I mean, football, we used to go to football practice, and this isn't like to say, like my dad used to, walk 18 blocks to go to school through the snow. This isn't one of those. We had 3 practices a day in training camp. 3. 1 in the morning, which was a full padded practice. 1 at about 12 o'clock, which was like half padded, but you did almost everything. And 1 at like 3 o'clock. And we had to stay there all damn day. And so that, there weren't water breaks either. You got 1 water break per practice. So the most disgusting thing we did, Brent, we'd go to the spigot and fill our helmets up full of water and drink it out of the hole in the thing just to get some water as you walk back to the practice. I mean, so that toughened you up. And it's I think of all the sports, and I played them all. And, I know you played baseball. I stopped playing baseball because in Florida you couldn't play baseball, football, and basketball because you had spring football practice. Yeah. And if you played basketball, you couldn't go out there and play baseball. But football is the one sport that brings you all together more than anything. your teammates in baseball, they were your teammates in baseball. Your teammates in basketball, they were your team. But football's different. It's a different kind of bond. And I would recommend anybody who's out there listening, if you're thinking about letting your kid play football in high school, do it. It's great for them. It brings a lot of competitive drive, and it makes them understand what life's all about. You mesh with a lot of people, and I think that's a good thing.
So Coral Springs High School, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and where's the age with your brothers? Like, how close were you guys, and that competitive nature and kind of that toughness starts to mold a little bit with them?
Well, my oldest brother's a year and 2 days older than me. And the funny thing is when we moved to South Florida from Pennsylvania when we were in 8th grade or 7th grade. And he was small then. He's not small now, but he was small then. He was actually bigger than me, but he ended up getting held back. His grades weren't great. So my parents said, okay, well, we're moving down. Nobody's going to know you got held back. So they held him back a year. So we were always in the same grade. And so when we were in high school, like, girls would come up to us and go, "Are you two twins?" And I'd go, "Yeah, my mom held me in for a year and 2 days." I gave him that line. But so we were always together. Then I had a younger brother who was 5 years younger than me. And then as he got older, he became competitive. And then we had a brother who was 10 years younger. He has since passed away, but he was kind of the baby of the family. And so we kind of babied him. But as far as competitiveness within my dad was competitive as can be. So we'd go play basketball on the front. We had a hoop out front. We'd play, and my dad would come out and play, and he played until he was like 60 almost, and he would get into it. So it was fun.
Do you think you were a pretty good athlete? I mean, we all do in our own minds, right? But were you a pretty good athlete for either that time or place or what?
Yeah, I was a good athlete. I mean, for that time, it's funny you say that because Clint Session, and remember he was in Jacksonville for a while, and he played in the league. His father was on my high school football team in 11th grade, and then he transferred to Ely. And, I always kept in touch with him. I was in the Bahamas once, and he was actually on the JV basketball team. He didn't make the varsity that year, and I was in the Bahamas, and I bumped into him. And him and his wife, and I brought my wife over, and I go, "Clint, tell my wife I was better than you in both football and basketball." And he's like, "Well, he's hemming and hawing." And he goes, Pete was good. He gave me that because I was a good athlete. I was a really good athlete, to be honest with you. For being as little as I was a good athlete. I was the starting point guard in 11th grade. And then I was the starting guard on the football team, and little, and fought, and was the smallest guy on my line. And I battled. And so, yeah, it was weird because I'd get bulky to play football, and the basketball coach would get annoyed and say, he'd go to my dad, he'd say, "He's getting too bulky for football, and he needs to quit that and just play basketball." My dad would go, "He loves football. He's playing both. You don't want him, you don't play." So in 12th grade, I came back, and you don't get, the basketball team starts practicing in October, and if you play football, you can't go until after football is like in November 10th or whatever it is. And so he always held that against me. And so senior year, he decided, every time I'd go in, I'd start and I'd turn it over or something, or, take a bad shot that he thought, and he'd pull me. And so I said, "I ain't playing like this." He's being stubborn. So I was like, there was like 6 weeks left of the season. I could see what he was doing to me. And I went to him, I said, "Hey, I ain't playing this way anymore. I'm done. I'm graduating. I'm going to college in the fall." I said, "I'm done." And he looked at me and he went, "Well, Petey, he always had he called me Petey. They all call me Petey. He goes, "Petey, you always had a great basketball mind. What can I do to make this team better?" I said, "You dumbass, you should have been playing me the whole damn time."
Have you seen him since?
No, I think he's passed away. I saw my football coach. It's funny you asked that because I did go back when I was coming down here, when I was living in Jacksonville and flying down. They were playing. He was assistant coach. Still, he was like an older guy. He was assistant coach. And about 6-7 years ago, I went and saw him. And I hadn't seen him in, decades, and I go, "Gary." I'm yelling at him, and he's like standing on the field warming up his offensive line because he was an offensive line coach before he was a head coach. And he looked over at me and he goes, "Petey!" And I go, "That's me." And he comes over and we start talking. And I looked at his team and I said, "Holy crap, your team is enormous." I said, "I'm not playing on this team. There's no conceivable way." He looked at me and he went, "We'd find a way for you."
That's
awesome.
I mean,
it's amazing how big kids are and how physical they are now. I mean, like when I was in high school, Brent, I was 165 pounds as a guard. The kid next to me was a big offensive tackle, and he was, 225 or 230. And it's just amazing at how big and strong and physical these kids are nowadays.
It's unbelievable. It's hard to play second base at 165 pounds now. Never mind guard.
Yeah, I mean,
it's unreal.
And we're talking about playing against that. Like I played James Jones. Went to Florida, was a big time running back. It was a first round pick. We played him in high school. I remember he's across from me. He knocked the tackle next to me down and stood over him and said, "Get down, fat boy." I mean, he was in 10th grade. He was a grown man, but so we played good players. But across the board now, they're all bigger, stronger, and faster. It's amazing.
All right, so we'll fast forward this a little bit. What's your first job in writing when you get out of Arizona State? And, I mean, you end up getting to Jacksonville in 87, so there's a bit of a gap. You probably graduated around 82. Yeah. What do you do between graduation and getting to Jacks?
I did a lot of, I came back here to South Florida. It's funny because I drive by the building all the time. And on Sunrise Highway, there used to be a Broward County Bureau for the Miami Herald. And that was my first job as like a high school / part-time, it was a foot in the door. So I'd cover high school games. I do, I took bowling scores from Myrna in, some play, it was all the minutia crap that you never really want to do, but it was foot in the door. There were good people working in there. I mean, like Mark Newman, who went on to work at Sports Illustrated, was in that office. Greg Cody was in that office. I mean, we had a lot of people in that. It was fun. And so that was the first job. Then from there, I ended up going to Denver, which was the best experience of my life. I worked for the Denver Post, but I was brought in as a part-time, but really full-time. It was weird. They had, because you made full-time money and you just had to do it a different way. It was different, but it was the best experience of my life. I covered the minor league hockey team, and I covered the University of Denver hockey, and I did sidebars at games for them at Bronco games. So. Oh, wow. It gave me a lot of experience. And like I went on the road with the hockey team a couple times, like I went to Indianapolis when they played their playoff game. The minor league team played the Indianapolis team. It was the Flames. I had the Flames, and they were the Indianapolis Checkers were the Islanders minor league team. So that Flames team, by the way, and they were crazy. And I was younger then, so I was crazy with them. Those guys ended up moving up to the Calgary Flames and won a Stanley Cup. I mean, it was Al McGinnis and Mike Vernon. These guys all ended up being really good NHL players, and they won a Stanley Cup. So I had a great experience with that. Learned in Denver, it was so competitive with the other newspaper back then that you learned how to be a competitive guy. And that's where I really learned the business a great deal. So from there, I left. I didn't like it. Was during the 84 Olympics. They said, okay, well, now you got to sit around here and take scores from and I didn't feel like doing that. I go, this is what I went into profession for. So I figured, okay, I'll go back. I was thinking about getting out of the business, and I get a job in Oklahoma. And I end up going to Tulsa, which was like going back in time for me. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, they had liquor by the drink in Oklahoma when I was there. Think about this for a second. This is how backward it was. And you'd have to go into a bar, and there'd be a sheet. You'd have to put your name on the sheet next to a number. And that number corresponded to a bottle inside the bar in case there was a raid. It was your private stock. And I'm like, what? And we're talking about like Bennigan's and Fridays and all of them. They all did that. That's how different it was. But it was. Wow. I had a lot of good experiences there. I was a knucklehead. I'll be honest with you. I was a knucklehead in Tulsa. I ended up getting fired, deserved to get fired. I'll be honest with you, 100%. I deserved to. I was goofing around. I was an idiot. But I got a lot of experience there, and that was another learning experience for me. I got to do OU and I got to do a lot of different things. For example, this is a funny story now when you look at how the NBA has evolved. There was a basketball player from Tulsa named Paul Pressey. He played in the NBA for a long time, played with the Milwaukee Bucks. So they said, we want you to go. They're playing the Rockets. We want you to go to Houston, get with them and do a story. I said, that's great. I look forward to that. So there's a Southwest flight from Tulsa to Houston. So I got to get on the plane, and the Bucks are on my plane. They were flying to Houston. They had connected, but not connected, but it was a stop from Milwaukee to Tulsa to Houston, they had to stop. These giant guys are sitting in Sidney Monk. Remember Sidney Moncrief?
Yes,
He's sitting in the giant seat. He was a great player. And so, that was the kind of stuff I got to do.
They travel different now. By the way, was that the only job you ever got fired from?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
Does that surprise you?
Rightfully so. And then I came back and I was thinking about getting out. And I started becoming the South Florida correspondent for the St. Pete Times. Got to do a lot of stuff down here, Dolphins, Hurricanes. I'd go to Orange Bowl. I did a lot of stuff for them. And then I got the job in Jacksonville in '87. And Gene Fournette, by the way, had been there for 42 years when I showed up.
I did the math quick there. How did you get the job in Jacksonville? Did somebody come find you, or did you find it?
I applied. There was a buddy of mine from ASU that had gotten a job in the Times Union. He has since passed away. Jeff Fries was one of the best writers that paper ever had. And so he recommended me, and the guy that was the sports editor then, Craig Stanky, ended up working at CBS, ironically. He has since passed away, but he hired me. I came in for my interview. Frank was working there. Tony Fabrizio was working there. Ray McNulty, Jeff Reese, and we all came in, and they took me. I remember, I went to Harbor Masters was down on the river, which was, what was the place? It's still there. It's like with the dock on the other side of the river.
The chart house thing? Or you right downtown?
It was Harbor Masters, but it became something else. It's right there, we're down from the chart house where they have the boat docks right there. The slip. It was a club, and it was a big club back in the day. Everybody used to go there. Well, I went there for dinner. Then we went to like CJ's for quarter beer night. And so I'm like, on my interview, I'm like, I'm not going to get this job. And I ended up getting the job. And my first job, you know what it was?
No.
It was covering Georgia. The University of Georgia. So I'd fly up there and do games. And they had money back then, so they would do that.
Crazy.
And I did a lot of bowl game stuff. Like I was the Gator Bowl guy, so I had Clemson, so I had to go to their games at the end of the year. And then the next year, I became the Gator beat guy, and I covered the Gators. And they hated me in Gainesville. Oh my God, they hated me. I used to call players at their houses. It was bad. But I was a good beat guy. But that's why they hated me. And to this day, if you go back and hear stories, they hated me in Gainesville. So I did that for a couple of years, and then started doing the NFL in '89.
So this is one of the reasons I want to do this show. I learn a little bit about Pete Prisco, but my part of this is I love the industry and how the industry really has changed. And I think it's crazy that you and Frank and other people used to go at that time in the late 80s, cover the Georgia Bulldogs on a beat basis. It just seems so far-fetched to what we do today. We hardly make it to Gainesville. But then you're a good beat guy, and you're in Gainesville. That makes a lot of sense. Huge college town. Gators are big, right here in Jacksonville. Makes a lot of sense. But if they didn't like you then, I guess my curiosity is, how much were you just doing your job and they didn't like you, or how much was it that it was just your personality? Where did that come from? Like, where did you get that a lot of people wouldn't maybe do, even in you can be a good writer and not do that, or you can be a good beat guy and not do that, but you didn't mind that level of confrontation, I guess.
No, never did. No, look, if I had a question for you and you don't like it, oh, well, if they don't make guys available, I bitch about it. I mean, and college wasn't as restrictive as it is now.
Oh, of course,
it was still very restrictive. And by the way, that was a competitive beat back then. Every paper in the state had a guy there. Some had people living there. We'd go down 2 or 3 times a week. It was me and Jeff Fries. He was the other. We had 2 beat guys on that beat. That's how big it was. And I was kind of like when Osher became the other guy when I was the beat guy. I was bad cop. He was good cop. So it kind of played that same with Jeff Fries. I was bad cop. He was good cop. So, again, it was competitive. It was fun. It taught you a lot. But we did try. We traveled with the basketball team. We traveled with the football team. We did a lot of stuff back then. I mean, it's a different time. And then when I started doing the NFL, which was always my passion, by the way. The NFL, I didn't grow up with the SEC. It wasn't the NFL was always my passion. So when they said, look, we want you to do the NFL, and you do the NFL and the expansion process, I said, okay, right up my alley. I loved it. And I used to go to games. I'd go to games every week. And then I'd go to the Super Bowl. I mean, I went to playoff games. I did. We traveled with the NFL. It was like weird, which got me.
And we
out
did
there.
not have a team.
Yeah, it got me to meet a lot of people in the business and a lot of connections, and so that helped from that standpoint. But it was great. I mean, I went to 37. I've gone to 37 straight Super Bowls now, and somebody told me I'm second. I have the second longest streak going of anybody.
Wow,
which is pretty amazing.
That is amazing. That's a nice badge of honor.
And I think Mitch Albom actually has the streak. Think about that. Really? He's not even an NFL guy.
Wow, how about that? That is pretty crazy. So you gotta give me a little bit more on that, though. Did you replace somebody who was covering the NFL, or did they decide around that time, like, hey, we need to be covering the NFL? Were there whispers that, hey, someday Jacksonville could get an NFL team? What was that dynamic?
Pat Dooley did the NFL. Do you remember Pat Dooley? He went to Gainesville, but he wanted to go to Gainesville, I think, and do something columnist down there. And he did the NFL. And once he left, then they made me the NFL guy. If I remember correct, I think that's how it worked out. Because, yeah, I think so. And once I was in, I was in. I wasn't giving that one up. And by the way, Frangie always wanted to do the Gators anyway. So once I left the Gators, then he did the Gators.
Yeah, so that was perfect.
Yeah, so that was perfect.
Okay, so when do you start covering Jacksonville might get a team? Do you remember?
Right away. It was right away. We'd go to the league meetings, the spring meetings, the fall meetings, just to get a nugget. Think about that. Like I'd fly. I can remember one at Coral Gables. They had a fall meeting at Coral Gables, and I remember driving down or flying down and going to the meeting and trying just to get a morsel for a story, and just to get something for Jacksonville still have a chance. Oh, Jacksonville still has a chance. There's your story. That kind of thing. But it got me in with a lot of people, including Roger Goodell. That's where Roger Goodell was the point person for the expansion process. And in fact, there was a group of writers from Baltimore, from Charlotte, from St. Louis, Jacksonville, and Memphis, all trying to get teams. So we kind of all would show up at every meeting. So we got to know each other. And then we all started calling. He didn't like it. Roger would laugh about it to this day. We call him the boy who would be commissioner, because you could see where he was going. And he'd always go, Don't say that, then they'll never pick me. Don't say it, don't say it. And we go, the boy who would be commissioner. And like, so I've known Roger for 30-something years, to the point where, like, his relationship with me is different maybe than most, because how I goof around. Like, I remember sitting at a Lions Thanksgiving Day game. I was doing that. This is even when I was at CBS. I'm sitting in the lunchroom talking to somebody, and next thing I know, I feel flick in the back of my hand, and I look up, and it's him. I go, Roger, you're commissioner of the NFL. You should be doing that crap anymore, But so that was invaluable, and through the whole process, and how they were going to get a team, and people I met, and the people in the league I met. So it was really good experience.
This place must have been riding high writing about that stuff, right? And especially when it did happen. And we've heard all the stories, and we've talked to some of the folks.
You know what, though, Brent? It would collapse like every Tuesday, so it would go away. Everybody, they would go to pull out. Touchdown Jacksonville. It was going to pull out. The league wanted Wayne Weaver, but they didn't want Jacksonville. Remember that story? They wanted him to go to St. Louis, and he said no. And so there was a lot of, ups and downs through the whole process. And then they were out, supposedly. And I'm not going to reveal my source, but I got a story. I got a source called me and said, I'm telling you, they're not out. They're going to be in. And so I wrote the whole story. They're not out. And everybody what is he doing? They're laughing at me around the league and stuff. And as it turned out, they were in. And that was an amazing day in Jacksonville to get that team.
Yeah, well, it turns out your source was pretty good. I've heard now, when I did a little homework for this segment with Pete Prisco, Storytellers of the 904, that you really, I don't know who gets credit for breaking Tom Coughlin to Jacksonville, but you were all over it, right?
There's bad blood in that story, so I'm going to give you the background on that one. I got wind of that and called then President David Selden, who always got into it with me, always. We got into it all the time. He was abrasive and tough to deal with, and we always got into it. So I got wind of that, and I called him. And I'll be damned if not 10 minutes later, it's on the crawl, on everybody's crawl across the TV. Jaguars going to hire Tom Coughlin. He screwed me. And to this day, if I saw him, I would tell him 100%, you screwed me. You released it after I called you. You weren't going to tell anybody. So I had it first, but he gave it out once he knew that I had it, just to get one over on me. You know, what other story I did, Brig? I broke Spurrier to Florida.
Oh, wow.
And luckily, because I was flying back from an NFL game and saw him at the airport. And then I called Frank, I think, and technically I went over to Spurrier. I forget exactly how that worked out, but that's how that story got.
That's pretty wild. You know, that's an interesting deal. You say that about you had the story on Coughlin, but it's later at night, right? I think is how you described it.
And we don't have the internet then.
Well, that's my point. So
really, I think it was. I'm not sure if it was later at night. It was like 6 o'clock or something like that, or somewhere along those lines. I remember that, and so I have no internet, or we don't have anything to break it. There's no way to break it.
You'd have to wait till the next day.
Correct.
Yeah, and so TVs can beat you at that time, obviously, if they get that because they're on.
And then he gave it to them, and they put it on the crawl.
Yeah, that one's still.
By the way, that wasn't the only time that happened in that organization.
Was it pretty competitive in Jacksonville at the time? I think, again, go back 30 years. We're not talking about a million channels. We're not talking about this and social media. We're talking about a bunch of different things of just a different landscape. We're talking about 2 TV stations. We didn't even exist. CBS 47 and Fox 30. It was CBS, which was Channel 4. It was First Coast News, and I think that's it. Then you got the Florida Times Union.
But when the team came, I think they had that it was Channel ABC was 25, and remember when what was it, Rick Renner? Was that his name?
Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
When those guys came together, then because they were kind of like an ABC NBC mix or something, weren't they?
Yep, still are, and they still are.
Yeah, when they came on, then it was 3 channels that were there on a full-time basis. But yeah, there was no, and you didn't get any newspapers covering the team. It was just the Jaguar. It was just the Times Union.
Yeah, so it was competitive, is my guess, right? You, Sam Kavaris, Hick,
it was very competitive.
Right?
Yeah, and you know, I was competitive with myself. If I, you know, and so I was driven. You couldn't get a better dynamic than 30 whatever I was, and 35-year-old Pete Prisco and maniacal Tom Coughlin. There was no better dynamic ever for anybody who covered this league. No, never.
Well, there's a lot of
yin, I was the yang. He was my obsession. I was his obsession. And he'd deny that to this end, but the stories are legendary of him and me and him in team meetings and him going to players and everything else. They're legendary.
Well, they are legendary, and we'll probably fill some time here with this, but what one sticks out to you? Because I know you were living it, and maybe not everybody knows all the stories, but what one to you is like just like the mountaintop of what you just mentioned?
It was a different era, so players were much more combative. And so before I get to his stories with him, but he was combative too, but he always tried to show me up, and it never worked. But the players were they would threaten you and want to punch you. And Vinnie Clark, the player, threatened to blow up my car in the practice field, loud as can be for anybody who could hear it. You know, and they used to come at you all the time. And you know, now some of them were playful and fun, but there were some of them who were mean-spirited. And, you know, I just stand there and go, okay, you know, I'm not going to talk to people. Tony Brackens didn't talk to me the entire time he was there.
Wow.
Now think about that. He's a star defensive end. I'm the beat guy. He wouldn't talk to me. So one day he's standing in the middle of the locker room doing an interview, and, you know, there's everybody around him. And so I walk over, and he stops. He goes, Pete, you know I'm not finishing this or talking to anybody when you're here. And I'm not leaving. I didn't leave. He ended up talking, but I'm not leaving. So I used to get that kind of crap all the time.
Yeah.
And there were other guys that were, Gary Walker used to threaten me every day. Every day. I'm going to
Did you deserve it?
No, because I was doing my job. No, I didn't deserve it. I mean, was I a pest and a pain in the ass and always looking for a story? Sure. But ultimately, a lot of those players realized they could play the game with me instead of against me. It was, because I was a guy that could take on Coughlin, and they knew that. So they would come to me with stuff. And can you believe what he did? But, there were times where Coughlin would hide injuries. And it was just infuriating to me. And I kept telling him, I go, you can't do that. There's an injury report for a reason. You have to be. And then I go out and talk to a player. And if they were a cool player, they would give you the story and say, look, my leg's messed up or whatever. But if they were a scared player, they wouldn't tell you, So one time on a Wednesday, Jimmy Smith didn't practice. Wasn't on the injury report, even though he was hurt. So I had enough. I had told Coughlin, I said, you keep doing that, I'm calling the league office. So I go outside. I had heard it from a couple different people, and I went outside, and I kind of, Seth Payne laughs about it now, but he said I tricked him into it. I go, yeah, so Jimmy wasn't on the practice field today. He goes, yeah, no, he wasn't. So I had another source on it. So I write the story, and the next day, Jimmy comes running at me. He's screaming at me. I go, Jimmy, it has nothing to do with you. It's Coughlin. Because it got out that I called the league office, and I put it in the story, And so Coughlin, this is what another one. He had promised me he was going to give me his contract extension when he got one. Because I wrote a column saying, look, it's time to give him an extension. He knew I did. And when I did that, he said, okay, I'll give it to you. And I said, okay, I'll have the story. Well, a couple weeks later, the team releases that he got a new contract extension. And so I waited for him that day. And he's coming down the hallway. And I said to him, I go, you effed me. I said right to him, I go, you. And he looked at me and he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, you promised me your contract extension and you just released it. And he looked at me and he went, once you called the league, the deal was off. Oh. And he stormed off. And so, yeah, there were a lot of those kind of, but the worst one with him was when he went after Brunell. Brunell threw an interception against Tennessee in the rain in the end zone. All he had to do was kick a field goal or whatever, and they threw an end zone interception. Well, Coughlin called him out that day, and then called him into his office and just berated him. And Brunell had enough. He was to the point where he was grinding on him too much. And so I get the story, and the Times-Union was scared, even though believe me, I had to think about the source. I had the sources, including certain guys in that building today. But on that one, I had the sources, and there were guys that wanted me to write that story. And when I went to tell the Times-Union, they said, well, who they always want to know who your sources were. I go, well, I can't really tell you who they are. I promise you they're, well, we're not going to go with that. And you have to soften it and make it a column. So I said, all right, fine, I'll make it a column. I softened it, but that there was a giant rift between the coach and the quarterback, which is never a good thing. The column comes out, and they play a game on Sunday in Pittsburgh, and I'm standing there, and the door swings open after they I can't remember if they beat the Steelers or lost it. Either way, it's bad. And he sees me, and he goes, you chicken shit little motherfucker, right in front of everybody. And John Saraceno, who was the columnist at USA Today, happened to be at that game. And he, of course, he's going to write it. And he wrote it. And so it became kind of a thing. And I'll tell you one thing about that. It ended up getting me a lot of goodwill inside the locker room because I would stand up to him. I wouldn't take it from him. And then, I always had great respect for him as a coach and as a person. Tom Coughlin's a great person. And I mean that sincerely. But he's a son of a bitch when it comes to running a football team. I mean, he was a maniac. And so the one thing he couldn't control was me. And it drove him crazy. He was nuts. And so I'd badger him about injuries. What are you, a doctor? And I go, well, around here, somebody's got to play one. And then, players would walk through with injuries, and I'd go, "Oh, so you got a bad knee? Oh, I can't say. And I go, "Why can't you say? It's your leg." "I can't say. You won't let me." And I'm like, this is out of control. So we had our battles. But when I left in November of 2000. And I went to him and I said, "Look," I put my hand out. I said, "I'm leaving. I know you know I'm leaving." I said, "I have nothing but the utmost respect for you." And he looked at me and he said, "I have nothing but respect for you." And that's all you could ask for. And
That's great.
We became a lot closer. He used to call me at home screaming at me. I mean, come on, give me a break. So afterwards, when I went to CBS, I actually was with him on his run to his first Super Bowl. I was at every one of those games. And I'll never forget in Green Bay, remember when his face was all red and he comes off the podium and he goes, "You were the only one." Because I picked him. He goes, "You're the only one." And he read everything, by the way. He acted like he didn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so, and we'd go to league meetings and I'd see him. And so it was Tom Coughlin is a great football coach, and he's a really good man too.
You sparked a couple of things there, and we're going to end up talking for 3 hours if I don't get going. But you got in a lot of battles with the TU, right? About stuff. That's what I've been told about, like, hey, I've got these sources. I've got this stuff about the team coming or not coming, or whether it was Coughlin stuff or the things that you just mentioned. I mean, those were real battles with your own employer, right?
It was much more rigid to get a story in. Now if you got a source, you can get it in if they trust you, and they had problem trust. I don't know why they had problem. They trust. It was not just me. It was everybody. They wanted, for example, if a player came to me and said, "Look, I got this, this, and this, and they're not doing this," then I have a story, but they'd always say, "Get a second source." I'm like, he came right out of the horse's mouth. So it was always that battle, but it was with the team, all of it. Like, I remember, never forget, I got wind of, what was his name? Charlie Rice was the CEO of Barnett Bank. And he met with Victor Kiam in New England to try and bring the Patriots. This was during the expansion process.
I remember that name.
And nobody wanted that story out. And I got wind of it. And the Times Union was so scared of that. But eventually I got it so good that they ran it. And he met with them to try and get the Patriots. He was going to try and bring the Patriots to Jacksonville while they're in the middle of the expansion process. So it was believe me, that was a bad story for the city. It didn't go over well. And then the other one was, before I took the job covering the team, we were investigating Florida State back in the day. And we had them. And I had them. And I did good work on that story. And Tony Fabrizio worked with me, and a couple other, Don Yeager, who went to Sports Illustrated, was on that. We had everything there. We did the confrontational interviews with Bobby Bowden. And, I had players, and they went and got an affidavit from one of the players saying that when I talked to him, he was under the influence. And he probably was. But they never ran it. And we had them. They were buying. We had them so many different ways, and the story never ran. It's not unlike when I left. Me and John Osher had a story on the Times Union on the training staff for the Jaguars on some of the things it was like a 4-part series on a lot of the things that had gone wrong, including Jeff Novak. I don't know if you've ever heard that story. Jeff Novak got a bone bruise, and it ended up almost killing him. And, they called them the maiming staff and not the training staff back then. And so we had a whole story. And when I was leaving, they were scared. They didn't run it. And when I left, they ran down a way bigger scaled down version. It took my name off of it, which was fine.
Wow. You mentioned, here's another one I want to get to, because you mentioned John Osher. And I was told, I want to, let's make sure I put this in the right context. Heck, now I can't find it, but it was said that you and John Osher might have been the best 1-2 punch in the country at that time.
Well, here's the thing about John. John is a great writer. John is fantastic at storytelling. John doesn't like to do the grunt work. John doesn't want to be a beat guy. He doesn't want to be the pain in the ass beat guy. And so, Yeah, well, it was a perfect combination for us because I was the bad guy and he was the good guy, and he was the writer and I was the grunt. I would get the story and he would tell this flowery prose of the story. It was like he would do a feature on the guy. So it was a great working dynamic, and it just worked, because it was two different styles, and it just seemed to work. And then when I left, I'll never forget that story. John didn't want to be the beat guy. He wanted no part of that. But he knew if I left that he was going to be the beat guy, because they were going to bring somebody in eventually, but not right away. So I'll never forget, we were walking into Texas Stadium, and what had happened was I interviewed for the job at CBS in the summer. And I just got married that year, ironically, but I interviewed for the job, and Len Pasquarelli, who was went to ESPN, but he was their NFL guy, and he lived in Atlanta. So another guy interviewed for the job who lived in Arizona. They never asked me if I moved to Arizona, so they called and told me, look, we decided to go geographically. We need another guy on the West Coast. So they hired Steve Schoenfeld, who ended up 3 months later getting killed in a car crash.
Oh, wow.
He got walking across Mill Avenue in Tempe. He got hit by a car. They still haven't found the person who did it either, by the way. This is 25 years ago. And they call, and so as soon as that happened, Osher, in his typical worry about himself way, automatically knew that they were going to call. They're going to call you. He kept saying they're going to call you. They're going to call you. And I'm like, it's callous if they call me right away, So they waited 5 days. And they called me when I was walking in Texas Stadium. They said, hey, you know what happened? We need an NFL guy. Are you still interested? And I said, absolutely. And so they gave me the offer, and I went back to the Times-Union with the offer. And I said, thankfully they didn't, but I said, can you do anything to match or keep me or anything? And they came up like $5,000 or something. I said, nah, not going to do it. And so that's when I left, and Osher became the beat guy for a while.
How about that? All right, one more story that I've been told that I want to get in before I just tick off some other things. The tooth story with Coughlin.
Which one?
The tooth story. Do you remember that?
God.
Oh, you had like a filling or something up with the tooth, and then he thought you were spying on him, I guess.
Well, he always thought we were spying. First off, he moved we had a media room that was inside the building. He moved it to the end. We were at the end of the building. Okay, where you walk in, where the elevator is. There's a room back over there. We were in there. And so we were allowed to get lunch, but we couldn't go in there. They allowed us to go in, get lunch, and bring it back over there. I was chewing on something, and I had a crown, and it popped off. And I'm like, oh, my God, I think I just lost my crown. And so I couldn't feel it. I couldn't what happened. So I went in that bathroom over there by the elevator, and there's no mirror. And so I go, I got to go out to where the lunchroom is, because, there's a bathroom over there and across the hallway. And the guard goes, and he had put guards in the hallway to keep us from going there. And the guard goes, and they were nice guys, the guards. He goes, Pete, you can't go in there. And I go, look, I just broke a tooth. I'm going in that bathroom to see what happened, okay? So I go in, come back. Well, needless to say, I go to the dentist next day, get it fixed. The next day, we're on the practice field, and Bahati Van Pelt was their PR guy, gets a call.
That's right, Bahati.
He says, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? He goes, the maintenance man is putting a mirror in that bathroom by the elevator. And so anytime anybody walks into the stadium, if you go to the bathroom to the left when you go into the game, that's the Pete Prisco mirror right there, because he wanted me out of that hallway and out of his business.
That's unbelievable. So, hey, you go to CBS in 2000. You've been there for 25 years. You've done a lot of different things, obviously a national writer, but I don't want to miss the doing this in front of a microphone stuff. I mean, you make this transition. I mean, now you couple it with what you do in terms of writing, which is your passion. But in this town, for a younger audience especially, you become one of the voices in Jacksonville, going all the way back to the ball, right? And then over at 9:30, and then with the Jaguars and Tony over the years.
It's funny, Brett, the ball, when we first started doing that, they had like a different guy a writer or somebody every day. So we did 2 hours. We were only allowed to do 1 day because the newspaper only let us do 1 day. Okay. So I had 2 hours. Oh no, I think it was a Tuesday because there was an off day. I think I did it on Tuesday. And so we drive over to the West Side and do it on the ball. And that's where I kind of got started. And I always loved doing radio anyways. And so because I do interviews on radio all over the place. So then Frank brought me on. We were on in the mornings together over by where was that building over there? By on Butler. You know where his where where the hospital is on Butler. It was over there.
Yeah. So you're right over there.
Mornings over there.
South Point or something.
A year and a half. 9:30 came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to get you to do the afternoon." And I said, "Well," I said, "Okay." So they made me a good offer, and I went back to Frank, and he tried to counter, but it wasn't going to get to the number. And I'll never forget. I would laugh about this all the time. Frank goes, you know how Frank is. It's different when you're the pilot and not the co-pilot. And I'm like, it's radio, Frank. It's not. I'm not operating on somebody's stomach, So, And then I went over there, and I was there for 7 years. And I'll be honest with you, that was a lot. And you're in the same position now because you work 2 jobs too. But I would go out on a Saturday, fly back, do a game on a Sunday, and race back Monday morning on the first flight to race into that studio at 3:00. And that was a grind. It was starting to wear on me because sometimes they'd get me to go to Thursday night game. It was a lot, but I loved it. I loved every bit of that. I had radio gold at my feet with Tim Tebow. I mean, it was gold for me. They called me Darth Gator for a reason. It was gold, and so I played on it, and then I'll be honest, looking back on the radio, there were some things that I would regret, and one of them being, and I would tell him this to his face, I was hard on David Garrard, and I even joked around and called him David Garbage or something, even and I was probably a little too hard on him. And looking back on it, I would tell him that. I would say, look, I was, it was part of the radio shtick. I was a little too hard on him, but most of the time I stood by what I never thought he was a great quarterback, and I would tell him that too. But I was probably a little hard on him. But the Tebow stuff, I wasn't hard on him. I was right about him. And so I played it out the whole. I'll never forget. I used to go to the Hit Center, and Daniel Murphy, the baseball, the Met, and he'd be wearing Tim Tebow shirts, and he'd go and he'd give me, and I go, he isn't any good, Daniel. He's just not. And it'll play out that way. And it ultimately played out that way. But yeah, the father used to call me off air all the time and scream, you don't understand this and this. And then I'll be damned if Mark Brunell didn't do one of the best things ever. It was funny. Yeah, remember Mark used to have like a celebrity golf tournament, a charity golf tournament. And I get there and everybody comes up to me. They go, you can't believe who you're playing with. And I go, who? Garrard? He didn't put me with Garrard, did he? He goes, worse. He put me in a golf cart with Bob Tebow for 18 holes.
Wow.
The week of the draft. And I'm like, Bob's talking, Timmy this, Timmy that, Timmy this, Timmy. And I'm like, oh my God, does he ever stop? He goes, when do you think Timmy's going to get drafted? And I said, I don't know, 2nd round. He goes, when do you think he should get drafted? I go, 5th or 6th. I mean, I told him, but Brunell laughed this chuckle, got a big chuckle out of that one.
Yeah, I bet he did. And I come to town during about that time and actually filled in for you a time or two over in those 930 studios. It's probably how I first got to know Pete. But the Tebow thing was real. Like, again, if you think about like all the attention it was getting, but you being the adversary because everybody else was on board, right? How do you say anything bad about Tim Tebow? And, I mean, you must have got some people that were like all over you.
Oh, Brent, I had people calling off air saying I'm coming over to the studio, and because he grew up on the West Side, so he had a lot of West Siders over there. They call up and say, "I'm coming to get you." They give me that stuff. I go, "Come on over. What are you going to do?" I mean, it got bad for a while. And look, I played into it, and I believed everything I said about it. The homeschool stuff. I used to call him the football mercenary. Because I said part of playing sports is hanging around with your teammates. He'd come in, practice, and leave. He wasn't going to school there. And then, father on the practice field at Florida used to drive me crazy. So I got into that. His father used to call me about that. Just different things, and that will go against everything I believe in that he did. And then, back then you could make jokes a little bit more than you can make now too. And remember the Philippines? Remember those jokes?
Yeah, I don't know if I should chuckle while listening to you talk about this or not nowadays.
Those Philippine jokes, though, they were endless. Remember, though, they were doing circumcisions.
Yes, yes, they were.
How
Were
many
you?
years ago was that? Those kids are now about 17, by the way.
Yeah, they probably don't. That was a while ago now.
Yeah.
Have you seen Tim and talked to him?
He blocked me on. I might be the only guy that Tim Tebow's ever blocked on Twitter.
Oh wow.
I'm blocked on Twitter by him. I haven't seen him. I bumped into his dad once, and he acted like he didn't know who I was. I knew what he was, and he was like, "Oh yeah, he played that game." But look, I have no. Tim Tebow's gone on to have a great life. He's doing great for himself. He's married with kids. I have nothing. He just wasn't a good football player. He never was. He was a good college player, but he wasn't a great NFL player.
Do you like being the adversary overall because you still get it, right? You don't mind going after people on social media. There's great interactions. Being polarizing in our business, all you got to do is look at Stephen A. Smith and other people. That's not a bad deal, but you got to have some thick skin for that. Is there an enjoyment level for you out there? Do you ever like, man, this gets old, or is it just you being you?
It gets. I mean, people have gotten nasty. I mean, I will say that people have gotten. I don't get in as many Twitter beefs as I used to, in large part because I think people are looking for a way to take you down. You know, and I'm at the point in my life I don't need somebody to take me down. You know, he said this when he didn't say, that kind of stuff. So no, I don't. I still will criticize players and teams. I'm never going to back away from that. And I'll face the music. I'll go right up to a guy and face the music. One thing I've learned being around the league is if you hit it head on, most coaches will respect it, and I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of guys kind of get disarmed when you stand up to them. And I always go back to Sean Payton. Sean Payton once, and I had a good relationship with Sean Payton for a long time. He used to say he was the best play caller in the league and, did a lot of stuff with him. And one time I went to cover a Saints game and his offense didn't score, and they shut out the Jets and won the game. I think it was like 9-0 or something. And Greg Williams was the defensive coordinator of the Saints that year. And I wrote a whole thing saying, look what Greg did, da-da-da-da-da. And I get to Atlanta when I fly home the next day, and I turn my cell phone on, and I got this nasty message from Sean. He's screaming, every curse word in the book. How dare you? I took money out of my salary to give him that, get that guy here. Da, 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 da. You know what I'm talking about. I called him right back. I said, Sean, what the hell are you talking about? He's screaming again. And I go, when I was writing those columns about you being the best play caller in the NFL, you never called me about that, did you? To this day, we've been fine because of that.
They don't usually acknowledge all the positive things you say about them. They hear the loud ones and the critical things. All right, let's to end this out. I want to go some lightning round quick. Hopefully, if we can do it. When you think of Jacksonville sports, who do you think of?
Me personally, probably Tom Coughlin. Now,
more than even Wayne Weaver.
Yeah, Tom, because I think he was Wayne brought the team there, but I think me personally, it's Tom. But if you ask me the athlete, the Jacksonville athlete, that's tough because I think it would come down to probably Baselli being one of them, but Artis Gilmore to me. Artis is such a big part of what Jacksonville was, and it was always around. And I was friendly with, God rest his soul, Rex Morgan, one of the greatest JU players of all time. I love Rex Morgan. He's one of my favorite guys that ever was around in Jacksonville. Had many a beer with Rex Morgan. But Artis Gilmore is probably in that conversation as well.
The favorite story that you wrote in Jacksonville or did in Jacksonville?
When the team came, the day the team came. That the headline was, yes, it's still around. You could see it. That was good. And plus, I still have a Gene Fournette story from that day. Gene Fournette was all frantic, as he usually is. He's running all over the place. We're in Chicago. And Gordon Forbes, the late Gordon Forbes, who was a football writer for USA Today, was the NFL writer. That's where this came from, by the way. He looked up at him and he said, "Relax, kid." And that's where that came from. I still use it to this day. In my newsroom, I use it. Relax, kid. Everybody uses it on me.
That's great stuff. The story that you wish you wrote and you never did, or maybe still haven't.
No, the Florida State story is the one. That's the kind of story that goes national and gets you that kind of recognition at the time, which I really would have wanted to get. That's the one. We had them. I mean, it's a major program that's winning titles, and we had them cheating. I mean, we had them. And so that's the one I wish we wrote it. It just didn't get published.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, by the way. Now that you've been in front of a microphone for, just as many years, it feels like, as stroking that pen.
I don't write that much anymore, Brent.
I know you don't. So do you miss it?
No.
Is this now your passion in front of the microphone? Like, how do you kind of compartmentalize that in your mind? A guy that grew up as a writer and has transitioned into, I would say, a voice or a storyteller in front of a microphone.
Yeah, if I didn't transition, I wouldn't still have my job. You had to change. Yeah, the medium changed, and you had to change with it. Now, the radio experience helped me transition to the TV side of things. It really did. And I tell I work with guys, and somebody will be long-winded and everything, and I'm like, no. But the radio teaches you how to talk in sound bites. You know what I mean? And so I think that helped me. But if I hadn't transitioned from away from writing to being the TV guy, it wouldn't have worked. So I'm glad I did. And I love it. I love every bit of it. I love being on the air. I love doing, shows. I love being a part of that Sunday pregame show that we do. And, it's exactly what I was meant to do. I'm doing right now what I was meant to do.
Two more. How important is it as a national guy to still stay connected to Jacksonville the way you have and do? A lot of people still love Pete in Jacksonville, and obviously you do the Jag show, you come on the radio and things like that, or do something like this with us, which we appreciate. But is it important to you to stay connected to Jacksonville?
Yeah, because, I spent most of my adult life in Jacksonville. I lived in Jacksonville longer than anywhere in my life. Think about that, So, yeah, I'm connected to Jacksonville. I still am. And when I come back, I still have that same feeling of when I, used to cover the team back then. I met my wife in Jacksonville. I mean, everything about me is still relatable to that city. And so the team is too. I mean, it was from the beginning, it was, it was born and I was part of it. And so, yeah, that's something that will never get out of me. I still seeing old players. I love that. The fan base, by the way, is entirely different, and I love it. When I covered the team, it was the wine and cheese crowd. That they went to go be seen. They weren't real, and then their kids became fans, and then their kids became fans, and so now it's a passion group, and they love it. And those guys are fun, and they have their own travel group, and they go out and do stuff. And when I see them, hey Pete, I was in the Bahamas a month ago with my wife, and guy over there looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, Pete." And I'm like, he had a group of people, and it was from Jacksonville. He's actually in Orlando now, but he knew me from Jacksonville. So it's still very much a part of me, and I love being on the radio there, and I love doing the show there.
When will the Jaguars finally win a Super Bowl? Give us a prediction.
Within the next 5 years. I'm a big believer in what they're doing now. And don't tell him I said this, but I think getting Tony Baselli in there is really good for the organization. They needed a buffer. They needed somebody that Shad Khan could lean on, and somebody that knew something about football, because he didn't have that. He never had that. He relied on Trent Baalke for the last whatever, and that's not a good thing. And so now you get Tony in there, and then you get Gladstone, who's really sharp, by the way, and then they hired Liam Cohen. It's all to be determined, but so far, I think where they're heading is in the right direction. And I think that's why I think in the next 5 years, by the way, I'm still a believer in the quarterback. I'm a lot of people in the national media have checked out on that one. Not me. But well, as witness, I'm going to talk to him next week, but I will say this. It's a big year for him, and he's got to go out there and prove it.
Yeah, I think we would agree with that. As witnessed over the last hour, he's one of the best storytellers that we've seen around here in Jacksonville. And that is another edition of Storytellers of the 904. Pete, we appreciate the time, man.
You got it. Take care.